Everything around me was melting. I couldn't keep a still thought. I felt my ego dissolving and melting, which seemed to be very frightening to me. I wasn't feeling too well in the gut, which scared me even more. I began to panic, thinking I picked poisonous mushrooms or something of that kind. I walked a lap around the garage. I was feeling extremely high, and I had a lot of trouble channeling my energy. This report describes my one and only bad trip, which I experienced at my house. It has been 3 months since I moved out of my parents' house due to some stress with my stepfather. I was 17, dropped out of school at that time, and worked part-time at Burger King. I have experienced mescaline 4 times, mushrooms 2 times, much weaker dose than the one I'm describing in this report, and have smoked marijuana regularly for the past 4 years. The mushrooms which I used I had found the day before while walking to my mother's house for a visit. I came back the same day with 2 friends who were older than me by 4 years. We collected 3 shopping bags full of mushrooms. That night we decided to celebrate our great find, so we went out and bought a load of new bongs and invited people over to trip at our house. That night, everything went smoothly. I ate about 6 raw mushrooms. I still do not entirely know what the mushrooms were, but from what I was told by my companions, they were blue meanies. When I woke up the next morning, I was feeling a bit funny in my hands. I couldn't grip things as tight as I normally could. After getting out for a shower, I walked into the kitchen to see my friend Chris washing a rather large load of mushrooms. To my knowledge at the time, we were the only ones there. It was 10 a.m. and all the other housemates were at work. Chris implied that it was a great day for tripping since it was just 2 of us all day, and no one would be there to annoy us. We made ourselves comfortable in the garage and began to chow down the shrooms. They didn't taste all that great, therefore we had to eat them slowly, chasing them with several bowls of marijuana. I remember getting through about 20, strongly believing Chris took somewhere around that too. I don't know what happened from there, but I recall waking up. I opened my eyes. What I saw was very unexpected. The visions exceeded my expectations. I have experienced visions of a similar level, but not of the same dimension, since they were mescaline visions. Everything around me was melting. I couldn't keep a still thought. I felt my ego dissolving and melting, which seemed to be very frightening to me. I wasn't feeling too well in the gut, which scared me even more. I began to panic, thinking I picked poisonous mushrooms or something of that kind. I walked a lap around the garage. I was feeling extremely high, and I had a lot of trouble channeling my energy. I reached for the bong in front of me, thinking I could bring myself down by smoking a bowl, but as I extended my arm, the bong melted in front of me. That frightened me to the extreme. I felt that the situation was getting worse and worse. I looked at Chris. He was asleep as well. He is a lot more spiritually advanced than me. I wish I talked to him, but I was too scared. I knew I needed help, not sure whether physical or spiritual, since I thought I was going to die from ingesting too many bad mushrooms. Despite all this confusion, I remembered something Chris told me a few days ago. I took action straight away. I walked up to one of the posters hanging on the wall. It's a poster picturing a nude man erupting from water, and each one of his body parts lines up with an overall diagram of the flower of life. I recall Chris saying this is a holy symbol which will always guide me as long as I take it under consideration. This gave me a boost of hope. I concentrated my thoughts, asking my guides to grant me help through this symbol. As soon as I thought that, I heard the gate squeak. Doing what anyone else would do while tripping in the garage, I yelled out, "Who is it?" What I heard was the concerned voice of my mother. Terror possessed me. My mum only knew I smoked marijuana, and being an Orthodox Christian, she would banish me for life for the use of anything heavier than marijuana. Confused, I crept up to Chris and silently woke him up. This took quite a while. He was very disorientated as well, but he seemed to be in control. I explained the situation as quietly as I could since my mum was already starting to walk the perimeter of the garage. Finally, I got through to him and asked him to tell my mum I wasn't home. He looked at me rather puzzled, then yelled out, "He went for a walk." My mother replied, What do you mean he is not here? His shoes are still here. I knew I was doomed, and that lying anymore would fuck it even more. I swung open the garage door and tried to act as sober as I could while walking towards my mum. Her being a nurse, it was rather hard to conceal my intense state of mind. I tried to spark a little conversation or something, to let her know I'm still half normal. I put on my shoes and hopped in the car with her, I don't know why, but I think that's what she instructed me to do. As we drove towards my house, I told her that I was very drunk and very stoned, which she seemed to believe. Inside, I was still scared and confused. I was still constantly thinking I was going to die in the next hour or so. As we got through the door, my mother put even more pressure on me. She instructed me to go for a shower and get some rest because she had to go to work, and I was told to pick up my brother from childcare and give him precise doses of several medicines. I panicked even more. I had never picked up my brother from childcare before. I didn't know where it was, and I was sure we'd both die, even if I made it to the childcare. I knew this was the moment of truth. I couldn't put 2 lives in danger. Mum came up again and asked me if I was up for it. I had to tell her. She had no idea what mushrooms were. Mum, I took a pretty harsh dose of a rather potent substance, and I think I need help. She was stunned. I couldn't get a word out of her. She just froze, for hours it seemed. I just stood there and looked at her. I became terrified. If she wasn't going to help, then who is? I shook her by the shoulders, but she was just too terrified, and I was too. I picked up the phone and dialed the emergency number. I heard a voice come out of this funny-looking object in my hand. This was my chance. I said, I need some help. I took a heavy dose of magic mushrooms, and I'm scared they might have other poisonous alkaloids in them. As soon as magic mushrooms were mentioned, I got put through to the police. I had no time to hang up or do anything, so I quickly passed on all the information to the police officer. He laughed at me, saying I am a dumbass for calling the cops while I'm tripping balls. This seemed very frightening. If the police don't give a fuck, then who will? I told the man I would put my mother on. He was rather surprised for my mum to be around. My mum retold the story once more, putting me back onto the policeman. Hang in there, buddy. We'll call the ambulance, he said. Mum laid me on the couch and told me not to move. Then she began to check my pulse and all the other things nurses tend to do. After she had finished, she started crying very heavily and stated that I am going to die. I have never been this frightened. Didn't feel like my moment to die. My perception started changing very, very rapidly. The entire room started to grow bright, and then, when it couldn't get any brighter than pure light, it grew towards total darkness, repeating this cycle every 2 seconds. I felt my spiritual element floating away. I've never experienced anything like this, but I was 100% sure this is what it felt like to die, fading away. I was losing my strength, my ability to breathe, and my ability to speak normally. I was becoming very detached, but I couldn't bring myself down. The feeling of death grew stronger and clearer. It felt like my body wanted to give away, but my spirit wouldn't. I looked at my mum and pictured her through her own eyes, feeling the presence of a strange force. I asked my mum to get the Bible. She was terrified and in tears. She didn't want to lose me at the age of 17. She came back seconds later and crouched on her knees next to my bed. She was hysterical. I asked her to open a random page and just read. As soon as she spoke the words, I felt extreme grounding. It was one of the most intense feelings I have ever experienced. It felt like coming back. My physical status improved a little. The room no longer grew bright, and I felt a release of some sort. I was still terrified, but no longer in the nightmare state of mind. I heard the ambulance coming, and then 2 people entered, a man and a woman. The woman unpacked her tackle box next to my bed and began setting up, asking simple questions at the same time. She did pretty much the same as my mother did 5 minutes ago. I told her that my mum had already done that. Please take me to the hospital as soon as possible. Then time froze again. No one was responding to anything I was saying. Even the electronic clock froze. This bizarre instant lasted quite some time. I thought that the world had accepted the fact that I had to go. I wasn't waiting for them. They were waiting for me. I was terrified. One thought went into the other, and I was in the ambulance charging towards the hospital. I asked the ambulance woman if she could tell me if I was going to die, since I was positive she was the person with the answers. She said she had never dealt with anyone who had eaten so many raw shrooms. This was not a pleasant thought. As we arrived at the hospital, they unfolded my bed and put me on it. They wheeled me through the ER. The entire ER staff were standing in 2 big rows along the walkway, waiting to get a glimpse of the freak. As I passed, a large nurse said to me, "Oh dear, not to be done again, hey?" I didn't know what to make of it. They put me in one of the compartment things they have, hooking me up to a monitoring machine. They ran a lot of tests, but in the end, they gave me nothing. They said I just had to sit and wait, and I should be fine. I laid in that bed for a further 7 hours, in some sort of a strange trance sleep. I was woken up every 30 minutes and asked what my name was, date of birth, and so on. At the end of the day, I was signed out. I couldn't see anything for 2 days, since my immune system was totally fucked. I couldn't walk either. 2 days later, my mum bought me a ticket to another city. She decided it'd be best for me to stay away from this environment. Since that trip, I have taken mescaline, LSD, and MDMA, and have had no negative effects. I did not write this report to condemn mushrooms. I write it to say that it was my own fault for taking so many shrooms, and I will attempt to take them again. Just this time, I shall pay more attention.